My story today actually begins with the story of my parents and how they met. He was 32, a country boy at heart, grew up raising cows on a farm. She, by contrast, was 23 at the time, and for the most part was a city girl. They went on a blind date. They dated for about 6 weeks. He proposed to her, and within 6 months they were married. Now, neither of them really came from a lot of money. Actually, neither of them actually ever finished high school, but they saved money. They opened a joint checking account. It was their only account. And through it all, they had a kid. We went on vacations. They eventually bought a home. And in their own way, they had their version of the American dream. And really, I didn't think much about it for a long time, decades really, until this article came up. And some friends and I were looking at it at work. And the title was, "In Marriage, the Unseen Bottom Line." And in it, the author polls 44 of her friends who are in couple relationships, and 41 of the 44 friends pulled at least some money in one shape or another through a joint account. But what qualified as joint spending was what's really interesting. Some things were very mundane, like the woman would charge back the expenses related to a cell phone. Some of them were more exotic, though. For example, one woman charged back her massage expenses because her idea was that, well, I got this back pain because of this kid I had, and we know who's responsible for that. Still another woman charged back her waxing expenses with the logic of, if he's not going to share in the pain, he can definitely share in the financial burden. I guess that's fair. Some other things that were interesting in the article was that 30 of the 41 women who had joint accounts still kept their salaries in a personal account so they could have discretionary spending that her significant other couldn't see. Also interesting was that 14 of the women didn't know the password to their joint bank account. It says something about who was actually controlling the finances, I'm not sure. But for us who were reading the articles, we were wondering, there's something here, but is there an opportunity for innovation, to do something different? And as we flipped through more articles in the coming weeks, it was very clear that was true. There was an NPR report titled, "Call Me Maybe When Your School Loan is Paid in Full," which speaks to the challenges that couples have when talking about school debt, which is increasingly a problem. There was another article, which was in the Dallas Morning News, which was about charge accounts. And it was in essence about a woman whose husband seemed to be buying all these really nice gifts for her from Neiman Marcus, but all the commissions were actually going to his mistress, who was the personal shopper at Neiman Marcus, to the tune of $1.4 million. And of course, as we were going through the summer, there were a ton of articles about celebrity divorces, including Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes. And that's certainly another situation where conversations about money between couples are challenging. And you can see why when you look at the statistics. 37% of men and 56% of women acknowledge having lied to their partner about money. 11% of men and 14% of women have debts their spouse or partner don't even know about. 50% of couples indicate that the financial habits of their partner drive them crazy. 61% of household finance discussions lead to arguments, and perhaps most disappointing, couples who disagree once a week about finances are 30% more likely to get divorced than couples who disagree once a month. And so for us, at our work, we were wondering, this is a lot of different pain points and a lot of unmet needs. And certainly, firstly, for me, who grew up in an experience of a couple who struggled a lot but had really productive discussions, it seemed like an opportunity for innovation. And so we started what we called the Money Honey Project. And the goal of the Money Honey Project is, if money is a top reason why marriages fail, how might we innovate to change the game? How might financial institutions and startups do things just a little bit differently to encourage more meaningful discussions and enable us to have different behaviors? Like all good innovators, we started off by talking to and speaking with a variety of couples. Different ages, different lifestyles, different incomes, different races. And the other thing we did was try to bring in a little bit of that beginner's mind. So we actually had two people who were not dating each other pretend to be a couple and go to different banks trying to open a joint checking account. The insights were really interesting. Here's the first one. We don't always marry our financial match, and that's okay. There was an article last week in the Fast Company magazine, and fundamentally the idea was, what if you mixed or mashed up Match.com, a dating website, with Mint.com, a financial planning website? What would you get? Would you have more effective matches? Because you could see, oh, this lady here, she kind of likes spending money on food, and I'm kind of a food guy. That'd be kind of nice. Or he seems to have a lot of money, and I want to be a part of that. As it turns out, our research shows it doesn't matter. And in fact, it might be quite the opposite. Someone who spends a lot kind of likes to be with someone who saves a lot. Someone who makes a lot of money doesn't have an issue necessarily with being with someone who makes less money. And someone who, on average, likes to think about money and is really savvy about finances doesn't necessarily have to be with another person who's also financially savvy. And this graphic is a classic example why. It's a screenshot of Quicken, and there's going to be a certain segment of the audience here in the room who are going to say, yeah, that's nice, I don't care. It's a screenshot of Quicken. There's another segment of the audience here who's going to look at it and say, wow, that looks like Quicken. I want nothing to do with that. And there's going to be another segment of you, and this is the interesting segment, who goes, wow, I see a game. And that's what came out in the research is, for some people, and for one gentleman in particular, he goes, when I think about our retirement and saving $1 million, that seems like a fun game. Whereas for my wife, that seems like an impossible game. But you know what? We still have a great relationship. The second big finding was greater transparency does not necessarily lead to greater trust. Here's a case example why. These are just a handful of my receipts from the past few days. And if you were to look at it, you would learn a lot about me, right? You would see, wow, Gordon went to watch tennis a lot within the past few weeks of the US Open. He had a dinner with someone at midnight at a pizza parlor, and it was like $70. Who was he out with? You would see that I had a beer, a lot of beers actually, around $60 worth of beers on Sunday night. Who was that with, and why was he out on Sunday night spending $60 when he should have been home? And so that's just a few receipts, right? You add that up over a month, there's probably like 30 receipts. You have a full credit card statement. It's like 50 receipts, maybe less, or maybe more. And then you can see why having access and trust and transparency is really challenging if there's so much transparent. And as one woman said to me in an interview, she feels naked, right? Now that she's finally joined accounts with her husband, and he can see that, I just spent $75 at Sephora. Well, why did you spend $75 at Sephora? It's a tough challenge. And as one gentleman said to me, you know what, I don't actually care. I don't want to see everything she spends. I don't need a little tweet that tells me, oh, she just spent $30. Because really it works both ways, right? I'm never going to put my debit card that, hey, I just bought 2 Quarter Pounders at McDonald's. I don't need her knowing about that. The other thing, obviously, is sometimes a little bit of private spending helps. And so maybe it's an anniversary or a birthday or some kind of big event, and you want to buy her a gift. You want kind of this expression, right? You want this big shock and joy and sense of, wow, that's awesome. Not this sense of, oh, I already saw that on the credit card receipt. I knew you were going to buy me that, which actually happened to one of our interviewees. So that was the second insight. The third was that digital and digital products, they're helpful, but they're just a Band-Aid. They're not a painkiller. And certainly in this day and age, we spend our time using a lot of different mobile apps and our iPads and online websites. And that's great, but what we found in the research was that people didn't mind doing the first level accounts in their Amex card or their Chase Bank, but they were never really that interested all the time in going to a Mint.com. And it represented a huge hurdle for them for a few reasons. One was that, on average, it takes a lot of work to set up your Mint.com account, and that alone was a big hurdle and burden for them. And the second thing was they didn't want that much information a lot of times. Some people did, but other people signed up, actually went through the process, and quit. Because as one person said, I don't need an email telling me that there was a foreign exchange transaction fee on my account because there was an exchange or an expense in Berlin. I was in Berlin, I know. And similarly, I don't want more spam. I don't want offers for credit cards that might save me 40 bucks. I like my credit card. It's fine. And so that was interesting. And I'm not poo-pooing the idea of using apps and different types of interfaces to allow you to have good communications about where your finances are, and certainly couples need that. I'm just saying it's not a full solution into itself. The third big finding for us was combining finances only occurs when it's time for a major event to happen. And ironically, the wedding is not enough sometimes. It usually takes some other major thing where there's going to be a significant financial impact. Maybe you're going to buy a house, and you need to pull money together to make that happen. Maybe you're going to have kids, and you're going to worry about daycare and after-school type things. Maybe you're starting a business. Those are the types of things, and those are situations that put you in a situation where you have to have a joint account, and you're willing to go through the burden. And the challenge for any couple is to have this combination of experience between financial products and the store or the bank, digital experiences, and communications from your financial services provider to allow for you to have good communications about money between the couple. The challenge becomes when we think about a joint bank account, that experience is extremely commoditized, which is a nice way of saying it's super crappy. Think about it. You're a couple, you're getting together, you've been dating for a while, maybe you're married, and this is a milestone moment. You're going to go and open your joint bank account. And oh, by the way, behind that, you're also doing it within the context of maybe we're about to buy a house, maybe we're going to have kids. You go in, and this guy in this cheap suit kind of slaps down this collateral in front of you and says, hey, A, B, or C. Great. A, B, or C, I choose B. We sign some contract paperwork. We think about, well, what's our PIN number that we both remember? And then that's pretty much about it. You get this wonderful Welcome to a Better Banking Experience pamphlet, which mostly is about deposit disclosures that they're mandated to provide you by the government and what your fees are going to be if you screw up. You get 2 ATM cards, 1 for each of you, and although I've scrubbed out the numbers, what you'll notice is there's no names. You can't tell which one's yours and which one's his. You could lose one and you wouldn't know. Whereas by contrast, when you sign up for a hotel account, like a Marriott Rewards or a Starwood Preferred Guests, they at least do you the decency of telling you this is your card, has your name on it, gets you a little excited about some of the benefits you're going to get and places you can go. Why isn't that true of a joint checking account experience, right? And so the challenge for a lot of banks, I think, and the thing that we're going to try and solve for through the Money Honey project is when we look at all these different challenges that couples face and the tough conversations that lay ahead for them, what is that combination of experiences? When is it most important to have a digital touch point versus a paper touch point? When is it most important for the person to go into the actual bank and have a meaningful conversation with the staff? And what types of new products can we create to make good communication happen? As we think about the project ahead, we're not really sure what all the answers is. And we're going to spend a lot of time on that, obviously. But when I think back to the story of my parents, I'll leave you with one statistic. There's a project in the University of Virginia. It's called the National Marriage Project. And they found that 29% of couples indicated that the previous recession actually strengthened their commitment to their marriage. And it's funny when you think about that, because you could be a pessimist and you could say, well, that's because they were probably too poor to get divorced. That would be the pessimist view. But I care to think about it from the positive view, an optimistic view, which is the story of my parents, which is they went through a lot of tough stuff financially, failure of a business, lots of ups and downs. But through it all, it strengthened their ability to talk about tough issues. It strengthened their ability to communicate each other. And that ultimately, I think, is the biggest learning that we've gotten so far from the project that we call Money Honey. Thank you.